Hello there. This is the second video of this series. The first one I did was kind of an introduction to this series, which is a focus on the covenant and trying to bring the covenant back into the forefront of how we understand our relationship to Jesus. That is something that's very objective, very discernible. It's not just a subjective thing. It's not just a feeling about how I feel about Jesus. But it's a covenantal relationship that has a very clear structure that organizes and orders our Christian life. And the expectations become clear for us through the covenant, as well as the promises and the privileges. Both the obligations and the privileges become clearly defined, the better that we understand the covenant God has made with his people. And so that's what we're endeavoring to do, is just clarify things, make things, because it really is simple at the end of the day. It's not a complicated thing. God has established a relationship with us that's clear, that even children can understand it. And we've managed to make it either so complicated that you need a PhD in theology to understand it, or so simple because in the sense that you can just make it up yourself. Whatever you want it to be is fine. And we're kind of in that too, where it's either so sophisticated that we have to rely on the professionals to explain it to us, or so simplistic that simplistic because it can be defined by every individual however they want to define their relationship to Jesus. The truth is really not even in the middle. The truth is God has made it clear through the covenant that he's established with us. And I just wanted to start by just reinforcing that idea that, like I said in the first video, what we have is the Old Testament and the New Testament, which really comes from the Latin testamentum, which means covenant. So we have Old Covenant documents, we have New Covenant documents. And the structure of the covenant is the same from the Old to the New, and we're going to see that. But first, I just want to spend a little time talking about, or just looking at scriptures that describe our relationship as being covenantal. And just a few passages here. This begins, actually, the first time we see the word is in Genesis 6, verse 18, and this is regarding Noah, where God says, "But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, and your sons, you and your sons, and your wife, and your sons' wives with you." Okay, that's the first time we see a relationship called a covenant. Now, I do believe the covenant is there from the very beginning with Adam, and we'll see that. You don't need to have the word covenant in order to determine that it is one. Just like you don't need the word landscape every time you talk about rocks and trees and grass around your house. You may not use the word landscape, but you're talking about your landscape. So in the same way, because the word doesn't appear in the first chapters of Genesis, doesn't mean there isn't a covenant. But we'll look at that in times going forward. But also we see this used, describing the relationship with God as a covenantal one in Isaiah 24:5. "The earth is defiled by its people. They have disobeyed the laws, violated the statutes, and broken the everlasting covenant." So there you have it. There's a sense in which all mankind is under a covenantal relationship with the Lord, even though Israel had a very specific formal covenant established with God. We see this also in Hosea 8:1. "Put the trumpet to the lips, An eagle is over the house of the Lord, because my people have broken my covenant and rebelled against my law. Okay, Jeremiah as well speaks of the broken covenant. And at the same time, prophesies of a day when God will make a new covenant with his people. Quote, "The time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their forefathers when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they broke my covenant, though I was a husband to them, declares the Lord." It's interesting that the Lord would call himself a husband. And what we see is that marriage, right, is modeled off of our relationship with the Lord. And God metaphorically calls himself a husband to his wife, Israel. So that's fascinating right there, because what you see is the marriage covenant being patterned off of God's covenant with his people. But we'll come back to that in a minute. But so now we've got this old covenant, and now we've got the new covenant in Jesus Christ. And we see this spoken of in Hebrews, where this old is passing and the new is beginning. It says, Hebrews 8:13, "By calling this covenant new, he made the first one obsolete. And what is obsolete and aging will soon disappear." Again, Hebrews 8:13. Here's the Apostle Paul speaking of the new covenant. "He has made us competent as ministers of a new covenant, not of the letter," meaning the law of Moses, "but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life." So it should be clear from these passages that, and there could be so many more we could talk about. We could talk about Jesus in the upper room, right, celebrating the Passover, but also instituting a new covenant in his blood. Very similar phrasing, and we'll talk about this again too, but very similar phrasing to what you see in the Old Testament, a covenant in blood. And that was in the blood of bulls and goats, but this is in the precious blood of Christ, who's the fulfillment of the Old Covenant. So here we see clearly that our relationship with the Lord is covenantal, which gives it an objective, clear structure. And I would say marriage is a perfect analogy that God uses. And so, biblically speaking, marriage is a very clearly defined, objective thing. So it's not just a matter of the feelings or feeling intimacy with another person, although it is that, very important to a marriage covenant, but there's also objective criteria to a marriage covenant. When you get married, the man now is the head of the household. So the woman comes in submission to the man. He's taking on a very specific role where he's responsible to the Lord for the health and welfare of his home. He's responsible for his wife. He's the one who must take the lead in thinking about the household and the health and well-being of the household. And then the wife comes on as a partner, like Adam and Eve. She's a helper, a partner. And so the wife comes into that relationship as a helper in submission to the man. Not with, just she has her opinions and she's intelligent, thoughtful, brings certain gifts and talents to bear in the relationship that he needs to respect. But still, he's responsible as the head of the home. She comes alongside in submission. So it's a very objective thing. Like you can determine whether you have a healthy relationship based on objective criteria. And then you have children, right? Kind of like this third element in the family. And again, very, very objective criteria here. This is, of course, not marriage covenant, but it's the household where now the children are obedient to the parents and must honor them. This is a very clear structure that God has established. And back to the marriage covenant, same thing. You must be sexually pure. Okay, you must be devoted to the other person in a special way that you are not to other people. And that's, again, there's an objective criteria to that. You must be honest with each other. Okay, these are things would be a mandate, right, within a biblical marriage. You must be sexually pure, devoted to the other person. No one else has your attention and affection in that way. Objective, clear. And it's interesting because we do see the Bible talk about marriage, the marriage covenant, being a manifestation or a sign or symbol of our relationship with the Lord, which strongly suggests there's an objective criteria. And that informs us. And one thing we're going to see going forward, and next time we'll talk about God's covenant with Adam and Eve, how we begin to see this objective criteria throughout Scripture, this objective structure. And we're going to look at, again, the chart that we looked at the last time. 3 main elements to the covenant. The historical prologue, which shows God's initiative in establishing this relationship, manifesting his power, manifesting his grace, and giving clear proof of who he is as the Almighty, right? So that's the first, the historical prologue. We see this with the signs and wonders in the Old Covenant. We see it with signs and wonders in the New Covenant. Jesus healing, Jesus doing amazing things, forming this historical prologue, which then give rise to the mandates. That is to say, he calls us to himself and establishes how we are to be in the covenant. That would be the mandates, or how we are to obey him in light of what he has done. And then the third major element, the promises, which consists of blessings and curses. God promises both, and we're going to see Old Covenant and New Covenant, same thing. There's no change here. And that we receive blessings or curses depending on the mandates, how we relate to the mandates here. Whether we do them or whether we ignore them determines what we receive here, the blessings or the curses. Faith looks back and remembers God's awesome works of the past. We remember that, looks forward in hope for the promised blessings, and so by faith we obey in the present, looking forward to how God will bless us for that obedience, and in gratitude for what he has done in the past. We're going to see this structure. Okay, beginning next time, we're going to look at Adam, and we're going to see in the first chapters of Genesis this covenantal structure. Next, we will look at Abraham. Then we will look at Israel. Then we'll move forward to the new covenant, and we'll see that structure there as well. All right, looking forward to it. We'll see you later.